Good morning and welcome to this meeting of the SWestrans Board, Friday the 21st of November 2025. This meeting is being live streamed and recorded, and the public recording will be made available on the website for public listening following this meeting. Remote participants on Teams, please follow the good practice guidance, which includes muting microphones, switching off your video when you're not addressing the meeting, writing speak in the Teams chat function when you want to contribute, although I will look out for a virtual hand. No material should be posted in the chat function if it is intended as part of the discussion. The usual standing orders apply, including that any votes will be undertaken by roll call. Please speak clearly and directly into the microphone. When making contributions and when referring to reports, please provide reference to the relevant page and paragraph to allow everyone to follow. So, I've got to read that out. Apologies there. Any other business deemed urgent by the Chair due to the need for a decision? The first additional board meeting will be taken as item 11A. This was distributed late yesterday and is available to view online. There are hard copies available if required. The second local bus service update is an exempt report and will require us to agree to exclude the public, press and observers from the meeting. This report will be taken as item 11B. Copies have been distributed to the board this morning. So I'll move on to agenda item 1, which is Sitherant and apologies. Claire, can you confirm who's present today?
Thank you, Chair. I can confirm we've got 5 board members present today. We've got apologies from Keith Walters. We've got Maureen Johnston present with us as his substitutes, and 2 board members not present currently being Dookie Campbell and Stephanie Mottram. There's also a number of observers present today, and I'd like to welcome Kirsten Stannis to our first meeting as an observer. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Claire. So we'll move on to agenda item 2, which is declarations of interest. Do any board members have any declarations or statement of connections they wish to make? Don't see anyone wishing to come in. So we'll move on to agenda item 3, which is the minute of the meeting of the 26th of September 2025, and this is for approval. We're happy to approve. I'll take silence as acceptance. Thank you. So we now move on to agenda item 4. This is the community transport update. We've got Rhiann Davis, Third Sector Dumfries and Galloway's lead for the community transport is here. Good morning, Rhiann. I see you just popped up on the screen. So I'll just hand over to you. Well, first of all, can we first agree to receive the presentation? Yeah, nods. Okay, so over to you, Rhiann.
Good morning, thank you, Chair. Thank you for inviting me today. Can I just check that everyone can see the presentation okay?
Yeah, we can see it in the room.
Brilliant. So yes, I'm Rhiann Davis. I'm the lead for community transport at Third Sector Dumfries and Galloway. And through my presentation, I wish to give you a summary of community transport, what it looks like in D&G currently, and the TSDG-led project to develop a regional approach. So I'm not going to dwell on the wider transport provision and needs in our region, but I'd like to highlight a couple of things. So a third of the total population lives in dispersed rural areas, and nearly 1 in 5 households have no access to a car for private use. Perhaps surprisingly, this figure appears to be representative of rural areas and not just towns. And just for context, this is a reminder of how community transport is recognised in the regional transport strategy. So it sits under the theme 6, Sustainable and Extended Local and Regional Public Transport Connectivity. with the main priority being priority 29, outlined here, which is that SWestrans and its partners will work to deliver a new public transport model based around engagement-led, needs-based approach and apply the 3-tier framework as follows. Community transport is also referenced in priority 31 around demand responsive transport and priority 36 around a bus service improvement partnership. So I'm going to give just a brief summary of what community transport is. So the key thing about community transport is the community part. The specific needs are identified, developed and delivered by the community for the community. So by definition, it is a bottom-up approach. Transport is also not the end in itself. It's not just about moving people from A to B. It's the mechanism for things like social inclusion, poverty reduction and early detection of ill health. It is an enabler. Community transport is always run for a social purpose and never for a profit. That's not to say that it's always free at the point of use. Normally the user is charged, but the service is often subsidised and always aims to be affordable. For example, a return journey for someone from Langham to DGRI using patient transport is typically around £12. And it's not just about minibuses. Cars, multi-purpose vehicles, mobility scooters, and increasingly e-bikes are all used. So in terms of what it looks like in D&G, there are 8 local community transport operators where community transport is their primary objective, so it kind of says it in their title. And there's others where it's their secondary activity. For example, Kirkconnell is actually the Parish Heritage Society that also run a minibus, and South Mackers, it's the community centre. We also have 2 national organisations in the form of the Order of St John and Royal Voluntary Service who work across the region. So this map doesn't include every minibus, vehicle or electric bike used by communities in D&G, but many of those do come under the umbrella of community transport. So the ways in which these groups support their communities is varied. It includes things like community group minibus hire, home to school transport, scheduled services, patient transport using the volunteer car scheme model, weekly shop trips from rural areas to towns, social day trips and activities, and e-bike hire and loans. So I thought it'd be useful to share the findings from the SWOT analysis that I completed earlier this year. So starting with the strengths, there's good existing partnerships. So between community transport operators, there's a sharing of vehicles, drivers and knowledge. Between the community transport operators and private companies, there are agreements in place around things like charging of electric vehicles and a clear division of work, notably between operators and local taxi firms. There's also working relationships between the community transport operators and public bodies, such as the council and SWestrans, for example, through funding things like patient transport, admin support for the delivery of community transport, and sharing of drivers. The services are really well used, and this is down to the reliable staff and volunteers who run them, and also the fact that these organisations are in a position to find the needs of the community, such as lack of wheelchair accessible vehicles, a recognition of major trip generators such as health centres and places like DGRI. The work of these groups also contributes positively to targets across many sectors, including environment, health, transport and social inclusion. And this plays out at a national, regional and a local level. Finally, these organisations are very, very efficiently run. So most of these groups fund the majority of their work through fares, membership and hires. So grants only make up a small part of what they do, typically for vehicles or specific projects. One example being patient transport, which is currently funded by Poverty and Inequalities. So it's about around £50,000 per year, and last year the operators delivered just over 1,000 journeys. So that works out about £50 a journey, and that includes not just journeys within our region, which can also be quite large, but also out to Glasgow and Edinburgh as well. So moving on to weaknesses, some of these are common themes across the whole of the third sector, things like smaller number of volunteers and difficulty recruiting new volunteers. More specifically to community transport, there are fewer volunteers with the D or D1 category on their driving licence, which allows them to drive minibuses. So this means more expense for the operators who have to train people to get this. Increasingly, we're finding vehicles and drivers can be double booked or a volunteer can't be found. Also, these volunteer-only models sometimes do limit their capacity, so having paid roles might go some way to address this and allow for a bit more strategic oversight. There's also different standards between the operators, making uniting through a regional organisation more difficult. And there are some gaps in the region's cover, notably geographically in Dumfries, but also some population gaps. Some gaps aren't necessarily a bad thing, as we know provision is needs-led, but there is a definite lack of data on things like the use of community transport by carers and people living with a disability. So in terms of opportunities, it's worth noting that community transport is not a business in that they don't have a desire to expand for financial reasons. Ideally, they wouldn't feel the need to exist, but they are motivated by a desire to help the parts of their communities that are in need. Some of the opportunities listed below are really needs that are perhaps best addressed through community transport rather than other transport models. So yeah, opportunities, as I touched on, policy environment is quite supportive. The recognition of community transport as part of the wider transport network is very beneficial. And this has led to offers of wider partnership working, including sharing of vehicles. Some of these needs that have been identified are things like lack of accessible vehicles in the region and specific areas of work such as education and social work, where a lack of suitable transport is impacting the ability of these services. In terms of other opportunities, there are many secondary purpose organisations who, although not mapped here, are keen to address transport issues. As I'm sure you're aware, transport comes up regularly at consultations. For example, it's referenced in most place plans. And there is a change in delivery of healthcare coming with the creation of health hubs. So potentially there'll be less of a need for people to go to central locations, but an increased need to access local health hubs for outpatient care. So finally, looking at the threats, there's a general lack of public awareness of community transport. There's a view of community transport as a transport provider rather than a social service. And that can limit people's perception of the role community transport plays in improving quality of life. Their annual funding cycles and reduction in grant funding impacts parts of these organisations that use this. And the current lack of an unreliable electric vehicle infrastructure means community transport operators are less able to access grant funding for electric vehicles, which is one of the few pots of funding that is growing. There's also difficulties around the use of concessionary travel and taxi card funding, which represent potential income, and difficulty accessing the Section 22 permits, which allow operators to run local bus services open to the public. So I just want to give a little bit of background around the governance and funding of community transport. So the individual community transport operators are autonomous individual organisations, but since 2017, there's been an effort to work more strategically. So this was initially in the form of a public social partnership, which was made up of the NHS, Council, SWestrans, and two of the bigger community transport operators. And the aim was to plan and deliver patient transport more strategically. This work was and continues to be funded by Poverty and Inequalities. What has changed is the public social partnership is now become the Community Transport Strategic Development Group, with the main aim to build on this collaborative approach between third and public sector organisations and basically apply this to all aspects of community transport delivery, not just patient transport. So the main aim of the group is to redesign, pilot and procure services based on the needs of users. And the group's made up of three of the largest community transport operators, which is Wigtonshire, Galloway and Annandale. And then also SWestrans, Council, SOSE, Community Transport Association and NHS, as well as TSDG, who chair the group. So I've listed the main priorities of the group here, but I'm going to talk about point 4, developing a regional community transport organisation, as this is a project I've been employed to do. So this role is funded by SWestrans, the Council and SOSE. So just as a bit of background, I spent the last few months assessing and analysing community transport provision in the region and how this interacts with the regional and national policies, some of which was outlined in the SWOT analysis. I've also engaged extensively with existing operators on capacity, capability and willingness to participate in a regional community transport organisation. I've also started to engage with potential operators and groups emerging as transport providers. As well, I've researched the viability of some community transport solutions, for example, door-to-door, first and last mile, demand-responsive transport, and the role of active travel. So all of this is fed into the draft framework for a regional community transport organisation in terms of what it would do and what its aims would be. So it's culminated in the agreement on the mission, which is to create an investable and sustainable organisation which supports the Dumfries and Galloway Community Transport Network, meeting the needs of local communities. And also the aims. So the role of community transport is increasingly understood and valued by people and organisations in Dumfries and Galloway. The operation of a high quality and sustainable community transport network extends to all areas of need, and community transport is increasingly integrated with the regional transport network. So the draft framework also details 16 activities linked to these three aims. So these are things such as being a voice for community transport sector at a strategic level, promotion of community transport across the region, and offering a single point of contact for community transport users. From the outset, the idea has been for a regional community transport organisation to be a social enterprise. Social enterprises are businesses with a social purpose at heart. In Dumfries and Galloway, there are about 200 businesses operating as social enterprises. One of the reasons for looking at this model is it gives a bit of flexibility in terms of income generation. So trading, grant funding and commissions are all possible with a social enterprise setup. The advantage of the social bit is it is essentially asset locked, so that only the community can profit from the work, buildings, land and assets. So more research and development is needed into agreeing a final structure, but through initial collaboration, these principles listed here have been agreed on. One of the most important ones for the operators was that the regional organisation was not an operator in its own right, as existing community transport operators didn't want to kind of contribute to some of the existing problems, such as volunteer recruitment, as outlined earlier. It was agreed to focus on activities that existing operators have found difficult due to capacity. So in terms of next steps, as well as drafting a standalone business plan for the regional community transport organisation to get it investment ready, we're looking at upcoming funding opportunities, such as people place funding. So there's ongoing work on a collective bid between three of the operators, as well as TSDG, looking at piloting projects for last mile solutions and demand responsive transport, as well as some elements of regional coordination, which could be stepping stones to launch the regional community transport organisation. And this is an iterative process, so it requires continued research of the models and income opportunities, as well as further collaboration with partners, stakeholders and potential partners. So I'd say we're at a point now where we're entering the kind of next stage of making this idea into a reality, which, although not without its challenges, is something that is quite exciting. So thank you for listening, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Rhian, for your presentation. Very comprehensive. So I'll open it up to board members first of all. Any questions? I've got Councillor Hislop, Ivor.
Morning, Rhian. A couple of questions. Are you sort of affected by legislation like PVG? Because a lot of community things could be taking elderly or disabled or young people to events. And the other one is, you said that there was an issue with regard to not having a hub or a group in Dumfries. Do you see that if you actually put a community transport operation in Dumfries, where most of the routes are commercial, you might take money away from the commercial routes, therefore they wouldn't become sustainable and you would create a problem by operators leaving the system?
Mm.
Just come in, Rianne.
Cool, thank you. In terms of the PVG, yeah, that's something that is affecting the sector more widely. I haven't heard specific problems with the community transport, but yeah, it's affected third sector volunteers as a whole. So I think yeah, there is a bit of a barrier with that, but not too great a one at the moment. In terms of Dumfries, I think there are obviously like processes in place to stop any sort of undermining of commercial routes. But also the thing about commuter transport is it is needs led. So, for example, some of the services, so some of the operators, the commuter transport operators, they do a bit of work in Dumfries, and it's because for specific needs, and quite often it's that people can't actually get from their door to a bus stop. So community transport, the advantage of community transport is it's flexible, so they can go to somebody's door to pick them up, and that's not something that is taking away from a commercial service.
Has that been helpful? Yeah, getting nods in the room. Any other board members wishing to come in? Don't see anyone. Any observers? Douglas.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Rianne, for the presentation. Just a couple of quick questions, and I've got a little bit of knowledge on community transport, as you know, and I've been looking forward to the community transport organisation being set up, which just to ask you the questions. Will that group, once it is set up, start to look at filling in the gaps across the region? As Councillor Hislop mentioned, Dumfries is one of those gaps, but it's not the only one. And the issue around drivers and volunteers, the organisations are only of any use if they can maintain drivers and volunteers. And I understand that with the current lack of drivers and the lack of drivers having the D1 on the licence, there will be a need to additional training. And will the organisation be the lead in sort of taking forward that training on behalf of the groups as well, just to build that capacity within the system? Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for that, Douglas. Yeah, you're right. The training, looking at training in a regional way, is one of the activities that's been identified for this regional organisation to do. One of the things as well about the kind of lack of drivers, even though it is, as I did put it up, it is a bit of a threat. Another way of addressing it is actually through the use of vehicles. So, for example, we tend to think of community transport as being minibuses. That's kind of the traditional model. But actually, for example, Annandale Community Transport, the majority of their vehicles are cars. So I think there's also a bit of work to be done about which vehicles are being used and are they the right vehicles for the job. And obviously using smaller vehicles such as multi-purpose vehicles or cars does eliminate the problem of having a D1 licence. So I think there's two ways of looking at it. There's yes, addressing the training needs, but also looking at the vehicles that are used. In terms of filling the gaps, yes, there would be a bit of looking at this. So as I kind of said in the presentation, it's not about getting regional domination. That's not the point of community transport. It's about finding the need. And I think the current problem we're in a little bit at the moment, and this is where a regional organisation would help, is that there isn't a kind of assessment where there aren't community transport operators. You don't have that knowledge about what the local needs are. So, as I said, I identified a gap in Dumfries, and this has come kind of from talking a lot with social work, who were saying they're having problems, and health and social care more widely, in terms of it impacts their service users. So yes, the regional organisation would also look at this as well. But as I said, it wouldn't necessarily be setting up itself as an operator. It would be using the existing resources.
Yep, I'm getting nods from Douglas, so I'm sure he's happy with that response. I see the Vice Chair, Karen Jackson. Good morning, Karen.
Morning, Chair. Apologies for my late hand. technical issues at my end. Rianne, that was fascinating. Thank you for that presentation. Really interesting stuff. A couple of questions, and it might be too soon to answer them, so absolutely understand if it is. That question about the work around regional organisation, do you have any idea yet of the scale of investment that might be required to set that up? And the idea of a social enterprise, as you say, lots of different funding streams, but building into the thinking early on the financial sustainability, so that once you've got that regional organisation up and running, how do we ensure that it is financially sustainable? So useful to build that into the thinking, which I'm sure you're doing. And I think slightly linked to the points that Douglas was making, this really demonstrates how integrated community transport can be in part of the whole system. So that training piece and all the other benefits that community transport brings as well. So really excited to see it as part of the integrated transport offer for the region. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Karen. Yeah, so I've only just started drafting a business plan, so I don't have costs yet. But you're right to ask about the kind of financial sustainability, and that is something, obviously we're putting a business plan together for a few years, and that's why it comes back to the kind of social enterprise aspect. So if there's an ability to trade, that's something that we're looking at. We've looked at examples from across Scotland, but already do that in some way. So yeah, we're looking at a whole host, a really broad range of kind of income strategies. And obviously when we've got the business plan, I mean, I've been working with your colleagues who sit on the strategic development group and plan to share the business plan with them soon.
Thank you
Thank
very
you, that's
much.
great.
Thanks, Vice Chair. Anyone else? Don't see anyone else wishing to come in. Oh, Councillor Hislop.
Regulation again. You mentioned that you have cars that actually do this service. Do you find that they're regulated through the private hire licensing system? And do you need to have a private hire license to actually drive this vehicle, like we do if you were a private sector body, or is it different legislation?
So I don't know more broadly about that legislation. What I do know is where cars are used. So the main example of this is the volunteer car scheme for patient transport. So I think that is not applicable because it's a volunteer using their own car to take a community member on a journey. So that legislation doesn't apply with but I can't speak to kind of different schemes beyond the patient transport one because that's the only one that I know.
Thank you for that. Councillor Ingalls. David.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning. I just wondered if we can get a copy of the presentation emailed out, please.
Yeah, I'm happy to share that.
Excellent.
Thanks, Rianne.
Thank you very much. Don't see anyone else wishing to come in, so thank you very much, Rianne, for that presentation.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. We'll now move on to agenda item 5, which is the climate change duties reporting of 2024-25. We've got Kirsty Dunsmore is here to assist. If you have anything to add, Kirsty?
Thanks, Chair. Just one point that I wanted to add that's not included within the report, but just to bring the board's attention to the Scottish Government draft climate change plan, which has recently been published. So that covers the years 2026 to 2040. So it's currently out for consultation, with the consultation open until the 29th of January. So we do intend to submit a response to that, which will be brought to the January board meeting for the board's information. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'll open it up to board members. Don't see anyone online. Open it up to observers. Douglas.
Sorry, Chair, I'm going to be a pest, I think, today. Just a quick question to Kirsty, if that's possible. It's about the strategy that was agreed 12 years ago now, and it does state within the paper we're looking to review that. Do you have a timeline on that, or does that now wait for the Scottish Government's new document that you've just said as well, because obviously that will impact on what the strategy will look like. So I'm just looking for some kind of timeline, if that's possible.
Kirsty.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks, Douglas, for the question. As you'll know from experience, Douglas, that's been on the list for a while now, and it's something that we've been looking to review is our climate change strategy. But given that there will be changes, as you've mentioned, coming up with the new Scottish Government climate change strategy, it would be prudent for us to wait until that's now published before we look to review ours. Thank you.
Thank you very much. No one else coming in? Don't see anyone online. Okay, we'll just move to the recommendations, which is 1, to note SWestrans statutory climate change duties reporting requirements, and 2, agree to submit the 2024-25 climate change duties report for SWestrans by the deadline of the 30th of November 2025. Happy to do so. Yep. Okay, members, we'll now move on to agenda item 6. This is the local bus network update. Board members will have received this report as a copy to follow, and we've got Simon Bradbury is here to assist. Simon, have you anything to add to the report?
Thank you, Chair. No, nothing more to add from me.
Okay, so I'll open it up to board members in the first instance. Don't see anyone online. Okay, I'll open it up to observers. Douglas.
Thank you, Chair, and I'm sorry for my constant interruptions. I've got a few comments and a couple of questions, if that's okay, for the lead officer. In page 4, paragraph 3.4, obviously it's quite good news that there's been a reduction in the daily return rate offered by Houstons and Service 500. It doesn't actually quantify what that is. I was wondering if that was available from what it was to what it is now. I know what it is now, but what it was previously. That's just. Would you like me to go on with the other points, Chair? Or
how many questions, Douglas?
Another 3, maybe.
Do you want to take them one at a time?
Okay.
Okay.
That's fine. Thanks,
right.
Chair.
Simon.
There we are. I'm on. Thanks, Douglas, for the question. So I don't have the exact price on me. It's £18 something. 18.50 possibly. It's around about that.
Douglas.
Thank you, Chair. Paragraph, again, page 4, paragraphs 3.6 to 3.9. I fully understand the issues with the withdrawal of the commercial service, or the proposed withdrawal of the commercial service, and the steps being undertaken to find a solution to what will be a loss of a critical town service. And obviously the budget issues about the difficulty in trying to replace such a service for the board going forward. So a question there, and the work with following the community transport presentation, the work with ACTS to look at perhaps providing that replacement service. So one of the questions I have there is how confident are you that ACTS may take on that? What's the level of confidence on that being taken forward? The other thing in there, one of the steps that has previously been agreed by the board and certainly is established practice was that if there was no commercial operators willing to undertake the service, the next step was to seek tender prices, even though there's no budget at this point, to get a price back and then go to the council and ask for additional funding if there is an established need. And obviously there is in Annan Town, there's an established need. So I was wondering, it doesn't mention in the report that that step's going to be taken. And if that step is going to be taken, that was my other question. Will that step be taken if there is no operator willing to take it on as planned within the report? And that's my 2 questions in one, Chair.
Thank you. Simon.
Thanks, Douglas. Your first question in relation to our level of confidence in this. So it's a fast-moving and live process at the moment in which we've been in continued discussion and dialogue with Annandale Community Transport Services. Put it this way, I'm confident enough to have included it in the board paper today and continue to be in discussion with them. The lead at Annandale Community Transport is in fact on leave this week, but over the course of previous weeks I've been in discussion with her, and it's a conversation that's been had with their board, and they have board approval in terms of progressing with this and engaging further with SWestrans in relation to that. So just coming to your next point, so as you say, the budget is not available in terms of the SWestrans local bus subsidy budget. We've offered that existing commercial service to other commercial operators to understand whether or not they have any interest in terms of operating that on a commercial basis. As of this time, we've not heard from any operator that they intend to do so. And so on the basis of that, we're progressing in terms of ensuring that there is a service to the people of Annan. As you say, it's an essential service for them, but also in terms of catering for the widely called for, but admittedly kind of relatively small number of people who travel from Moffat to Dumfries in the morning. And on both of those cases, as I say, despite the recognised requirement and demand for those services, they do very much feel like a community requirement in the sense that they're relatively small numbers of people, they're making trips that are relatively flexible, and we have the opportunity to access funding on a community basis through the community grant programme. And so on the basis of that, it's for that reason that we're exploring this option instead of actually pursuing a formal tendering or procurement process for which there's no budget available.
Thank you. Douglas? Yeah, just come in.
Sorry, one more question, and then it's page 5, paragraph 3.14. It was just, again, about the publicity and about time information that stops. The report mentions the word soon. I was wondering if that was quantifiable.
Simon?
I wish it was. We continue to seek the support of colleagues in Scottish Borders Council. As you will know, Douglas, this exercise is both laborious, time-consuming, lengthy, and a manual exercise. SWestrans has had challenges over recent weeks and months in relation to resourcing, in particular in terms of resourcing of officers that have the intricate knowledge of the system and the resource and the capacity available to proceed with that. And so it's for that reason that we're enormously grateful with colleagues at Scottish Borders Council in terms of their support with this exercise. However, rightly, they need to prioritise their own work. And so there are periods of time where they've been able to support and they've allocated time in terms of the data entry, essentially, of the new services into the Novus system. But there are periods of time where, as I say, inevitably and understandably, their time and attention is drawn towards their own issues. And so it's for that basis that this exercise is ongoing. We continue to engage with them, continue to be grateful, but to some extent we're at the hands of their own priorities. I'm as frustrated as anyone else in terms of the delay in being able to get this data into the system, because that's the first and most important exercise that needs to be completed in terms of us then being able to roll out updated timetables across the region. But we're doing all we can.
Thank you. You happy with that, Simon? Yep. Simon Douglas, sorry. Apologies. So I've got Laura Moody, Observer Online. Good morning, Laura.
Morning. Sorry, I'm not on a very good connection, so I'm not going to risk putting my video on. I've just got a couple of questions. In this report, there's a few mentions of data challenges. I'm wondering how SWestrans is going to address those, particularly in regard to punctuality and performance data, and whether performance metrics are likely to be published, just so that we can sort of see how things are going from that perspective.
Thank you, Simon.
Thank you for your question, Laura. So your question in relation to data challenges, I assume, is in relation to, I'm just trying to find the relevant, it's this 7.2 on page 7. So this is in relation to contract management engagement with the operators. Yeah, so in terms of the updated terms and conditions associated with the new contracts, we've made specific requirements of the operators in terms of additional data and intelligence that we're asking of them over and above bus passenger and fare revenue data, which we've always asked for. So there's additional capability of the electronic ticket machines in relation to punctuality and service performance. So as you'll understand, in the few months since the go live of the new network, it's been a frenetic period of time, not just for SWestrans, but also for the operators themselves. And for that reason, there's been a number of issues that we've had to work through. And one of those is in terms of supporting operators in relation to the access of that information and ensuring that we have a reliable and consistent stream of data in relation to their performance. So that's ongoing. We continue to engage with the operators and indeed with the ticket machine company in terms of ensuring that we have access to that information. In terms of whether or not that will be public information as to whether we'll publish that in future, to some extent I think I'll probably have to come back to you on that one. I'll take that offline and discuss in relation to the degree to which that's commercial information and as to whether or not we can share that. But I'll be sure to be in touch on that.
Has that been helpful, Laura?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, and we're capturing the action that Simon's just made. And do we get information from Transport Scotland about the usage of the national entitlement cards? Do we get that data as well?
We do get that data, but we don't get that data, Chair, from Transport Scotland. We get that through the consistent supply of fare revenue and passenger data from the operators. So it's within that passenger data that they will glean from the ticketer, electronic ticket machine. They'll denote what type of ticket has been provided on each service. And so it's through that we get an understanding of different ticket types and so the extent to which the national entitlement card has been used.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much. Don't say, Councillor Hislop.
Chair, I missed it earlier on, but it was with regard to 5.2 in the financial outlook. After the process were spent up, yet in 5.2 we have no idea yet what the DGC buses costs are going to be. Now, as someone who's been in the council a while, was it combined services it used to be called, and they had this different calendar from everybody. It was month 13 costs, which were legal, that were put back onto them. Will that be something that we have to worry about financially going forward, that if month 13 comes into the bus contracts where they put out all the costs that they need to do, will that actually impact on our budget going forward? And or have we awarded contracts where we don't know what the cost of them are?
Simon.
Thank you for your question, Councillor Hislop, through you, Chair. So I might just look to my colleague Gordon to come in on the DGC bus costs and your first question, which I think I understand, but just in terms of the technicalities that I might just get Gordon Bryce's view from the council. On your second question, no, it's not the case. It's certainly not the case that we have no idea of the cost of DGC buses. This has been an exercise proceeding across the course of the last few months, indeed over the summer, whereas, you know, DGC buses had to pick up new contracts at short notice, and as part of that process, costs were provided in terms of the drawdown of funding for the operation of DGC buses routes from the SWestrans revenue budget. That process is very nearly finalised. It's just the dotting of the I's and crossing the T's in relation to the exact costs and the reallocation of that from SWestrans to the council. But Gordon, I'll let you come in.
Yeah, thanks for that. Good morning, Gordon. Can you assist Councillor Hislop?
Yeah, through yourself, Chair. Thanks, Councillor Hislop. So there'll be no month 13. Like Simon says, we're in the final stages of finalising the cost for DGC buses. There's the difference now to the period of time that you're talking about is the cost that we have are more live. I'll say that. So the technology that we've got running in the buses for fares revenue, for example, that's live as of this second. We already know the running operating costs of the buses for maintenance, fuel, telematics, etc. We know the staffing costs. All of that has been given to finance colleagues, and with the support of myself, for the technical point of view, we've got a budget built that is being finalised. I think I'm okay in saying that at this moment in time it's within the budget envelope, but that's still to be put to the board and members of the council formally.
Okay, a future report then. Yeah, getting nods. Douglas?
Thanks, Chair. I was going to bring this up under the revenue report, but since we're talking about DGC buses, so we might as well bring it up now. From what I understand from the revenue report and the discussion is that SWestrans are paying Dumfries and Galloway Council to operate these services. So it's almost they're treating Dumfries and Galloway DGC buses as a contractor. I just want to make sure that my understanding is correct in that, and it's because obviously the SWestrans budget comes from the council. So one of the models would have been that the council retained that element of budget and didn't transfer it, and then it wasn't a contractor, it was operating almost pseudo-commercially. So I'm just trying to get it round my head if it is now that SWestrans is contracting DGC buses and the money will transfer and then transfer back, if you understand what I'm saying.
Thanks, Douglas. Who wants to pick it? Simon, first of all.
Thank you, Douglas, and thank you, Chair. Perhaps I'll start, but I might just look to finance colleagues, if it's okay, perhaps just to come in on this one. DGC buses are not a contractor. We don't contract with them, they're the operator of last resort. And so DGC buses have picked up a number of routes across the region which would not otherwise have been provided through the procurement exercise. In terms of the technicalities of kind of the transition of funding between SWestrans and the council, I wonder if Stephen, Janet, I might just look to either one of you just to come in terms of exactly how that process will operate.
Stephen.
Thank you, Simon. So in terms of how it will work, you're correct. The transfer will happen as you've kind of outlined there. The money will go across to the council, and then the council will pay it back across to SWestrans. So we will keep it clear in terms of how we're accounting for that arrangement. So that is the current approach that we're putting in place.
Thank you. Anyone else? Ron?
Chairman, thank you. Just quite happy that the issue concerning the early bus from Muffet and Beatock has been addressed, because I've heard a lot of people from the town saying that that is a missing link for people to get into Dumfries for 8:30. Thank you.
Yeah, I appreciate your comments there. So, don't see anyone else wishing to come in? Okay, just move to recommendations, which is one, to approve the sending of a letter from the Chair to the Scottish Government to request further funding and support for the local bus network in Dumfries and Galloway. 2, note the efforts of SWestrans to introduce further improvements to bus services across the region within the budget available. And 3, note the intended withdrawal of the 80 and the 579 services, which is the Arran Town and Gretna to Arran, and the efforts of the SWestrans team to ensure that a replacement service is provided. And Ivor?
Chair, it's maybe a 4th recommendation. My understanding is the process for funding coming to SWestrans is through the block grant that goes to the council. Could we suggest, or could I suggest, that you write to the leader of the council that if any additional funding does come to Dumfries and Galloway for transport through your letters that you've been sent, that it is passported through to SWestrans for the use of on transport, because I don't think there will be any stipulation, unless it's ring-fenced, that would need to come to us.
Thank you for that. Is that a competent motion? I'm looking at governance, yes. I'm getting assurances on that. I suppose the only concern is that any funding that comes through the block grant for transport, is it always dedicated for SWestrans? You know, there might be extra funding that comes that's for entitled school children, for example, which is a council operation.
It was just if there was any came on the back of your letter for transport in this area, I think it should come to SWestrans, because we've written asking for additional funds, because we realise that there's services that we need to provide that currently we're struggling to.
Yep, so that's 4, our right to the leader, and make sure that it's ring fenced for SWestrans. Don't see any dissent from anyone, so happy to move on that basis. Thank you. So we now move on to item 7, which is the report by external audit on the 2024-25 audit of South West Scotland Transport Partnership. We've got Peter Lindsay here and Paul McAllister, who's online, to take us through the audit. So I'll pass over to you, Peter.
Thank you, Chair. Our first paper on page 55, this is effectively our covering report to our annual audit report, which starts at page 65, and I'll go through that after this first paper. So paragraph 1 on page 55 highlights that the good news is that we've issued unmodified audit opinions in our independent auditors report, which is included in the accounts, so which is effectively an unqualified or clean audit opinions on the annual accounts that are free from material misstatement. Paragraph 2 on page 55 highlights that our annual audit report includes significant findings in key audit matters section, and I'll cover those when I go over our annual audit report. So paragraph 6 on page 55 highlights that there are no uncorrected misstatements to report above our reporting threshold, which is £5,850, and that's included within the annual audit report as well. Paragraphs 9 and 10 on page 56 highlight that we seek written representations from the Treasurer in relation to the accounts, and the draft letter of representation is attached to Appendix B. And this is a standard practice within every audit, and the Treasurer will sign this at the same time as signing the accounts later on this afternoon. So moving on to our annual audit report, the key messages on page 67 also confirm at key message 1 there that the audit opinions in the annual accounts state that they are free from material misstatement. I should just highlight the first sentence there in key message 2 has been included in error, so I'll remove that before we issue the final annual audit report, which we do as standard anyway once the accounts are signed, because this is a proposed annual audit report. Key message 3 there highlights that SWestrans has no medium or long-term financial plan. Now, this is something we recommended back in our 22-23 annual audit report, and officers gave us an update as part of this year's audit, and we've included that in paragraph 36 on page 80. So in terms of the significant findings from the audit of the annual accounts, these are listed on Exhibit 2 on pages 74 and 75, and both of these are for information only. And the first one there on page 74, it relates to accounting for leases. And the first paragraph there highlights the background to this key audit matter is outlined in paragraphs 13 to 18. And effectively that we agreed with finance officers that the unaudited accounts would be provided to us prior to any adjustments being made to move the buses leased to contractors as finance leases. So as part of the audit process, finance officers carried out extensive work to work through the adjustments, and the accounts were updated to show the buses as finance leases, because effectively this is because the risks and rewards of ownership of the buses lie with the bus contractors, and this led to the value of the buses being written out the balance sheet for both 24-25 and the prior year, because a prior year adjustment had to be carried out to bring both of them down to nil. So we had to make sure that officers made those adjustments, and we were happy with those adjustments. So that's the reason why we delayed the sign-off, to make sure we were happy that the figures shown in the accounting entries and the accounts had been done properly. So the outcome there on Exhibit 2 on page 74 highlights it's for information only. The audit work that we performed found that the management had adjusted both 24-25 balances and 23-4 balances correctly and restated them correctly. And the other significant finding related to surplus assets. At the end of the financial year, SWestrans held 10 buses that weren't being used. They were surplus to requirements, and they hadn't been included, the value of them hadn't been included at the year end. And the evidence we were provided with showed that the buses were sold after the year end for a total value of less than our reporting threshold. And because of that, as highlighted in the outcome column there, because they're below our reporting threshold, we didn't request that officers amend the unaudited accounts to include them. So, following that, you can see from Appendix 1 that we've made no new audit recommendations in 24-25, and in the prior year annual audit report 23-24, we didn't raise any new audit recommendations, so there was nothing for us to follow up. And as I touched upon earlier there, we've provided an update on our 22-23 audit recommendation in relation to a medium to long-term financial plan in paragraph 36 on page 80. So really it just falls for me to thank finance officers that we've dealt with during the audit year for all their work around the accounts, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Peter. Yes, and thanks to your staff. So I'll open it up to board members. Don't see anyone online or in the room, so I'll open it up to observers. I'm looking at Douglas. Shake of head. No, thank you very much for that report. No questions, so good report. So if we just move on to recommendations, which members received the external audit report 2025 as detailed in Appendix 1. 2 is to approve the letter of representation to be certified by the Treasurer and appended to the audit report, and this is in Appendix 2. 3, approve the audited accounts, which will be certified by the Treasurer and Audit Scotland as detailed in Appendix 3, and note that the certified accounts will be made available to all members, and they will be available on the SWestrans website as detailed in paragraph 3.4. Thank you very much. So we now move on to agenda item 8. This is the risk management update, and Simon Bradbury is here to assist. Anything to add, Simon?
Thank you, Chair. No, nothing more to add on this one.
Thank you very much. So I'll open it up to board members. No one. Vice Chair, Karen Jackson.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks, Simon, for the risk register. It would just, so there's an awful lot of red on this, and that's inevitably worrying for board members. And I guess it's inevitable that there's red. It would just be interesting to understand from your perspective, and I haven't compared it to previous risk registers, is there much more red on this than previously? And how worried should we be about some of this? And also, it's probably a point of detail which I wouldn't mind talking to you about probably offline, but some of the risks I don't quite understand. So the first one, for example, mentions that on revenue funding risk 07 mentions integration with the regional economic partnership. I don't quite understand what that means. So that's probably a point of detail that would be useful to pick up separately. But it's just that gut feeling about how much red is on this, and whether there's other things we should be doing, and whether the board can help with some of the treatment that we need to be taking forward to address the risk. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Simon.
Thank you very much, Karen, for your question. You're right, and I cast my mind back to your comments on the last risk register, which we brought to the board. I think it was in January, and I think you had a similar comment in terms of how alarmed you inevitably were about the number of reds on here. And you're correct. I think by virtue of the fact that these are live issues, and to some extent they do have a high degree of probability and impact, they are issues that to some extent SWestrans as a regional transport partnership, amongst other regional transport partnerships, lives with, and that's in terms of the particular fragility of the bus network, as we know, and as we've just heard from the local bus network update, but also in terms of the the immediate and ongoing threat in relation to finances affecting SWestrans as with any public body. So I'm not seeking to minimise the threat, but sort of recognising that to some extent a number of these are ongoing issues which, whilst we have measures in place to try and treat, some of them, as you'll see, are issues that we simply have to tolerate, and we have internal controls to take account of and ensure that they don't disrupt or derail the strategic objectives of SWestrans as a body. Very happy to have a further conversation offline, in particular in relation to that issue, which is an additional one which we've added, believe I'm correct in saying, in terms of just looking to the horizon in relation to the broader strategic landscape in relation to regional bodies and the potential for reconsideration of those and the extent to which there could be any threats there, including in relation to funding. Issues that simply came up in terms of a discussion as a team with SWestrans colleagues in relation to anything that we need to keep an eye on and ensure that we're recognising in relation to risk management. But as I say, happy to have a conversation offline about that.
Thank you. Has that been helpful, Karen?
Yes, it has been helpful. I think it's that tolerate piece I'll just have to get used to. But no, that's helpful reassurance, Simon. And it would be, I find a conversation helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, we'd all like that reassurance. So can't see any board. Oh, Ivor.
Just on risk, is it O4, R04, capital funding, loss reduction or inability to spend capital funding, and then the treatment is to migrate active travel responsibility out of the council roads team. Surely by migrating the responsibility across to us, if there's additional money it will come, but if there's additional responsibilities that might actually cost more than what we're getting, it'll make it a more or a higher risk rather than a lower risk. So how do we see that as the benefit?
Thank you. Higher risk or lower risk, Simon?
Thank you for your question to yourself, Chair. You're right. I think we probably need to revisit that one. That is a particular point of issue which is live and under discussion at the moment with council colleagues in relation to allocation of responsibility in terms of active travel and infrastructure spend associated with that. So I think we need to expand on that in terms of the related action and just kind of bring that up to date. But it's a good point. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Don't see any other board members. Douglas.
Thank you, Chair, and I think Councillor Hislop's got my notes as well, because that was one of my questions relating to that one. But I have one other relating to page 127, and whatever that risk is, because it's underneath the page number, about the lack of bus operators. One of the internal controls is a further business case development for DGC buses as a municipal bus operator. I'm failing to understand why that's a SWestrans internal control. Surely that's a council matter, not a SWestrans matter. SWestrans should be involved in discussions, but it's not a SWestrans internal control, in my opinion. All right.
And your opinion is always welcome. So, Simon?
Thank you for your question, Douglas. I'd agree. I think in terms of internal controls, as discussion between ourselves as SWestrans team members, that was identified as a consideration, as indeed it was throughout the course of this year in terms of discussions around and that dialogue between ourselves as SWestrans officers and council officers is continuous and ongoing in terms of the relationship between ourselves as the Regional Transport Partnership with responsibility for the contracting of the subsidised bus network and indeed DGC buses as operator of last resort and the extent to which they fill those gaps. So you're absolutely right in terms of an internal control. That is one which is which has responsibility through the council, not through SWestrans, but included there as a control in the broader sense.
Thank you. I've got Luke. Good morning, Luke, one of the youth councillors.
Good morning. Thank you, Chair. It's just on page 133 under Code R20 on the lack of clarity and awareness of SWestrans and its role. And it says that there'll be an overall review of comms approach to communicating the public transport and active travel network assigned to the comms team. it just seems to me that we're slightly going the wrong direction. I mean, in the last month, I've noticed that the agenda and minutes are now going to be shown on the council page, not the SWestrans page, which seems, if you remember the public looking in, that seems to me that it's becoming more integrated with the council, and also considering that most of the risks here mention that something is provided by the council. And for example, the link for the bus times on SWestrans links back to the council, and so does a link for active travel. So it seems to me that we're sort of moving like more stuff from SWestrans onto the council, and especially with the minutes and agenda, would it not be better to move that back to SWestrans to keep it separate so that there is more awareness and clarity of that they're two separate things? Thank you.
Thank you. I believe it's still on the SWestrans website, Claire.
Thank you. There is a link across from the SWestrans website to where the papers are. Yes, if you're correct, living on the council website. It is listed under partnerships. It's not a council committee, and perhaps there's some benefits for SWestrans in it being that way as well.
Yeah, I think, was there not a request from elected members that sometimes it was difficult for the public and even other elected members that don't sit on the board to get access to the agenda, etc. And it's not only just SWestrans, is my understanding. I think the IGB is now on the council's calendar as well, so you can access that link to that as well, I believe.
I haven't got any knowledge of the IGB, but certainly there have been other bodies using the council's website. It just puts us as a SWestrans board and the officer supporting the board more in control of the papers.
You got anything to add, Simon?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And thanks for your question, Luke. I think it's a valid question, which is why we included that as an additional risk in terms of raising awareness of SWestrans in terms of clarity on it in relation to its roles and responsibilities. As you'll imagine, that's an issue that members of the SWestrans team deal with on a day-to-day basis. SWestrans, as the Regional Transport Partnership, is a separate entity to the council, but as you'll recognise, is intrinsically linked, and Dumfries and Galloway Council is a core partner of the partnership. And indeed, we receive support services from the council in the form of legal, communications, procurement, and indeed governance with Claire as our secretary. So that's one example where we rely upon the council to some extent, and indeed in terms of this modern gov system. So we've replicated the process for SWestrans board papers moving forward as we do with other council committees. That doesn't represent an extent to which SWestrans is being absorbed by the council. Rather, it's just an opportunity for us to benefit from support services of a larger organisation than ourselves.
Has that been helpful, Luke? Thank you very much for that. Don't see anyone else wishing to come in, so we'll just move to the recommendations. Members were asked to note the changes of the risk register incorporated into the version included in the appendix, and 2 is to consider and agree the latest risk register for 2025-26, and that's also included in the appendix. Happy to do so. Okay. Now we move on to agenda item 9, which is the Revenue Budget Monitoring Report 2025-26 for the period ending 30th of September 2025. We've got Janet Sutton is here to assist. Janet, have you anything to add to the report?
Nothing to add to the report, Chair.
Thank you very much, Janet. So I'll open it up to board members first of all. Nope, don't see anyone coming in online or in the room. I'll open it up to observers. Nope. Okay, very good report, Janet. Thank you very much. So we'll just move to the recommendations. One is the revenue budget available to SWestrans for 2025-26 of £4,838,786, and 2 is the forecast outturn for the revenue budget as at the 30th of September 2025. Happy to note both. Okay, thank you. Just move on to agenda item 10. This is the capital expenditure Programme 2025-26, 26 to 27 update, and Simon Bradbury is here to assist. Have you anything to add to the report, Simon?
Thank you, Chair. No, nothing further to add.
Okay, I'll open it up to board members. Don't see anyone online. No one in the room. Open it up to observers. Douglas.
Yeah, just a quick question, Chair. I'm sorry to ask another one, but it's on paragraph 3.15, the active travel infrastructure tier 1 funding. It's quite a significant amount of spend, but it doesn't say what it's been spent on. I was just wondering if there's some clarity on what that money has been spent on.
Thank you. Simon?
Yeah, thank you. So we haven't kind of broken down in terms of the specifics of individual budgets in terms of this. But I think moving forward, that probably is something that we can do. Grant, are you happy if I hand to you just in terms of giving us a flavour of the active travel tier 1 funding and how that's separate from other funding sources?
Grant?
Yeah. Thanks, Chair, through yourself. The council asked us to provide the REBA stage 0 to 2 feasibility studies, and we did 6 of those, which are still ongoing, and we're just waiting to get the stage 2 report, hopefully by the end of December. We've also did 2 REBA stage 3 to 4s, detailed planning and drawings, again on behalf of the council as part of their tier 1 funding. And we're also helping out regarding the REBA stage 3 to 4 in Dalbeattie, looking at the bridge in Dalbeattie work, again on behalf of the council this year for their tier 1 funding. And I think the remainder of the tier 1 funding, roads were using it for minor works. So that's for 25-26.
Thank you, Grant. Douglas?
Yeah. Thanks for the response. I think it would be useful to actually see those broke down because, you know, into a table at some point as part of this ongoing report, just so members particularly are aware what locations we're talking about, not just 3 or 4 different projects that could be anywhere. You know, I think it's useful just to see exactly where the money is being spent. And it's just, even if it's just an update, just quite,
Thank
so
you.
we can track the progress.
Absolutely. So I'm sure that's something that we can get in a future report, Grant.
Yeah, absolutely, Chair. We're working with Donna Allardyce to try and standardise the reporting for capital projects, similar to how the council do it, to make it easier to understand and make it a wee bit more standardised. It also gives it a wee bit more detail, again, the stages of it, the costs of it. So it will we're hoping to have that at the beginning of next year to bring forward to the board, if that's okay.
Thank you very much. Claire's captured that as an action, so thank you for that, Douglas. No one else? Don't see anyone online. Okay, we'll just move to the recommendations. So members of the board are asked to note the update on the capital spend in the 2025-26 financial year. Noted. Yep. Thank you very much. So we'll now move on to item 11, any other business which the chair may decide is urgent. As I intimated at the start of the meeting, I have agreed to take 2 items. So we've got item 11A, which is the additional board meeting. Copies were distributed late yesterday and they're available online. So Claire Rogerson is here to assist. Claire?
Thank you, Chair. I've got nothing to add. Thank you.
Okay, so I'll open it up to board members. Ivor?
Chair, do we really need to make this submission? Because I don't know what the submission is about. It just says we're having a board to make a submission.
I'll pass on to Simon.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Hislop. Indeed, so in terms of this board meeting, we've presented it as a requirement, really, in terms of a funding opportunity, as we mentioned in the paper there, which is hot off the press. It's live. This was an announcement by Scottish Government at the start of the year as part of their programme for government, with the intention of funding a bus fare cap in one individual regional transport partnership. Within the last 48 hours, we've had a briefing from Transport Scotland in relation to the opportunity to bid for and express an interest in that bus fare cap, £2 bus fare cap across the region. And that briefing was held with ourselves along with the other 6 regional transport partnerships. Today, at some point, we'll receive from Transport Scotland the template pro forma for that expression of interest, with the requirement that we submit it, should we choose to, should the board approve that we were to submit such an expression of interest 2 weeks today. So for that reason, we've proposed a board meeting the day in advance of the submission date for that £2 bus fare cap, to seek the board's views on it.
Ivor?
Chair, if it's got to be fully funded, why do we need a board decision? Why can't we just delegate to the officers to send it in?
Claire?
Of course, it could be perhaps that the lead officer would prefer the board to make a decision.
Simon?
That's exactly the reason. I anticipated that this would be a decision regardless of governance and whether or not I as lead officer have the authority to take that decision. I felt that it would be a decision that the board would be keen to have a say in.
But I suppose in governance terms, we could make that decision to delegate. That's basically what you're saying there, Ivor, yeah.
Yes, if the board were minded to fully delegate the matter to the lead officer, then you could do that.
Ivor?
Chair, Mr Bradbury gave us a good reason for it, so I'd be happy to move the recommendations as detailed.
Thank you. So, no one else? No alternative, okay. I don't know if observers have got anything to say. No, shake your heads. Thank you very much. Okay, so we'll just move to the recommendation as is. Happy to do so? Yeah, nods in the room. Okay, thank you everyone. So I have no other items of business for the public meeting, and I would like to thank observers for their attendance today. So we'll move on to the exclusion of the press, members of the public and the observers. It is recommended that members of the board agree to consider the following item of business in private and exclude the press, members of the public and observers from the meeting, given the report contains confidential or exempt information in respect of paragraphs 6, 8 and 9 of Schedule 7A of the Local Government Scotland Act 1973. Can we agree on that, board members? Yep. Thank you very much. So once again, thank you.